Black Ops 1 is the first time that Treyarch really got the chance to stretch their legs. Once again, this was a game that was expected to compete with Modern Warfare in terms of polish, innovation, and variety. And surprisingly, they actually do a pretty solid job here. Set far after World War II, Black Ops 1 narrows its sights on the idea of secretive government programs, experimental weapons, and lots of grit. It still follows on from World at War to some degree, by heavily involving the Russian soldier Reznov, with whom you traveled during the Soviet sections of the previous title. Black Ops is all about conspiracy, twists and turns, and characters. More than any of the previous games, Black Ops spends a lot of time fleshing out its characters and is all the better for it. I found the big reveal itself to be rather well hidden, with cracks starting to show in the right places only in the latter sections of the story, hinting toward the player that things aren't as they seem. Even better is the final twist, which ties up what I previously saw as a kind of cheesy and lazy ending. The game is also a huge improvement over World at War in terms of presentation. It looks light years nicer, animations are great, voice acting is improved, as is the dialogue. It doesn't stop there either. The mission design is just as large of a leap over World at War. With stronger enemy encounter design, better level structures, more varied and interesting set pieces, and even more nuanced underpinnings for those set pieces. For example, at the end of the first mission, you might not initially realize it, but they give you infinite sprint while you're running for the plane. These minor concessions for pacing and fluidity greatly expand how polished set pieces can be, even over Modern Warfare and Modern Warfare 2. That being said, this game is definitely not without issue. One of the most immediate, new issues I found was in the amount of blood that appears on screen after just getting shot once. There's so much that it gives you the impression that you've taken a critical amount of damage and are inches from death. In reality, the amount of damage you've taken is not perceivably different from all the previous titles. This creates an issue because not only does it mean the screen is constantly covered in so much blood that it can be distracting and hard to see, but the amount of blood doesn't progress as much as you edge closer to death. It makes it incredibly difficult to know when you're taking a huge risk or not, when you are close to death. This leads players to one of two options. Either you take the risk and hope that you still have plenty of health, or you spend a much larger than normal amount of time sitting around behind cover healing, just to be safe. Maybe there's something about the system that's different from usual, but if that's the case, it should be explained to the player. Flinch is also still very much an issue. At this point, it was starting to get rather tiring. This much flinch just isn't a particularly engaging way to punish players when they get hit, especially since the weapons are hit scan, so players can't realistically be expected to avoid damage using skill. There are also some strange tricks that seem to be played with numbers under the hood, which is why I mentioned earlier that I'm not completely sure if the health system was changed in any way. In most instances on regular in this game, I could expect to take around 5 or 6 shots before going down, depending on the weapon I'm being hit with and what range, of course. But in the rainy mission on the rooftops, for whatever reason, I was regularly downed by standard weapons at a standard range in just 2 shots. It felt like the game had suddenly just switched to veteran difficulty, and I can't say I approve of whatever's causing this. To be fair, that doesn't make it exactly like Veteran, because Veteran also makes enemies incredibly accurate, arguably unfairly accurate. Back when these games were fresh, I played through all of them on Veteran. For most of them, my first playthrough was always on Veteran. But Black Ops is one I just couldn't stomach finishing without dropping the difficulty. The level where I noticed something was seriously wrong was this early one where you're trying to stop the missile launch. I got to these offices and was stuck there for literal hours. As I played, I started to notice that many enemies acted almost like they had an aimbot on, and would snap to me in just a few frames, before downing me almost instantly. This isn't a phenomenon that I experienced in any of the previous titles, and while I tried to get to that point on Veteran again here to capture footage of this, I just couldn't be bothered, and this footage of me attempting to get there on Veteran explains why. Honestly, these days, I don't think Veteran is a terribly well-designed difficulty on most of the games, and this is exactly why. It's not challenging in a way that engages the player, it's just a war of attrition and patience rather than skill and intelligence. This footage also illustrates the problem I referenced when talking about World at War, where these early Treyarch games in particular really have a hard time auto-killing enemies as you move up. This one dude here became a huge problem as I tried to progress, because it checkpointed me with him still hanging out behind us. So at the start of every attempt, I had to remember to turn around and kill him, otherwise he would snipe me with his pea shooter from across the base a couple minutes later. There are examples of this on regular too, like in this section where we're climbing this hill area. Again, I'm not supposed to be a super soldier, I'm supposed to be part of a unit, so I shouldn't be expected to do everything. Other usual problems are still here as well, like enemies going into last stand and overusing explosives. They also still rely too much on infinitely spawning shooting galleries that expect you to carve openings to move forward. The only other major issue I felt was worth mentioning was that performance seemed to be the most shaky of any of the games thus far. Still playable, but I would have liked a solid 60 FPS. The game also took slightly longer than the others, at about 4.5 hours. So the only other question that remains is, how does this compare with Modern Warfare 2? I've said a lot about how it improves on World at War, but then how does it stack up against the best of its predecessors, the game everybody was really comparing it to? Honestly, I think they're about even. They both shine in different areas and have weaknesses in different areas too. Black Ops is the game for the player who cares more about characters and likes a good plot twist, the player that doesn't mind a rough game, as long as it takes risks. Modern Warfare 2 is for the person who cares more about the world a conflict is placed within, and how that's portrayed. The player that likes a polished game, but one that isn't near as edgy. That's not the conclusion I expected to come to with Black Ops, but, well, there you are.